Welcome to Insightly. I'm Melissa McGinn.
And I'm Jordan Walker. We're your hosts on a mission to empower executives and business leaders with the knowledge they need to turn data into a driving force for innovation. Join us every episode as we share real-world case studies and provide practical tips to unlock the full potential of your business through data and analytics.
So if you're ready to transform your relationship with data, hit that subscribe button, because in the world of business, insight is power. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Insightly Podcast. We're so glad you're here. I think we're on episode 17 now, so we're past the threshold of when most people quit podcasts, so we're doing pretty good.
Wow.
We've at least had the grit to keep recording, even as people listen or don't listen. But if you're new with us, this is your first time, Insightly is all about talking about how businesses can use their data better. We truly believe and we're passionate that data and using it effectively to make strategic decisions, to see how your business is doing in every aspect is key, pivotal to growth and staying competitively advantaged moving into the future. And so we talk about everything from innovation, security, and kind of everything in between so that you know how to either get your company started on a data journey or what to do in the midst of one.
Find questions that you should be asking.
If any other data nerds are out there, you just want to listen for fun. Great too.
Welcome.
Today, we have a special guest with us. Tarek has been in the IT sector for 20 years.
Woo.
Almost as long as you're going to tell us that it's maybe been around. He's worked in various positions throughout his career, from help desk tech, system admin, network admin, project manager, security officer, and in the last 8 years, his focus has been on compliance. So in 2018, he decided to start his own company, Ember Technology, which focused on compliance and security, and it was later sold to, how do you say it? Soteria Technology Solutions. And now Tarek serves as the Director of Security and Compliance.
Cool. I didn't know that. That's really neat. I didn't know that, Soteria.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, we're right off of Central. And,
Yeah.
135. You probably see it. Yeah.
Yeah, I see it all the time. Nice.
Soteria is really Greek goddess of protection.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your, I guess, transition from doing some of these roles, help desk, system admin, into starting your own company. I'm really interested in that.
Okay. I started out in IT almost 20 years now. I started out as a help desk. I did my degree in software engineering.
Okay.
Did not find a job in that. It just so happened that we here in Kansas, we're not big into the software side, or at least wasn't. I don't know what it is now. So I kind of went into the help desk side of things and slowly evolved and started doing everything that was needed. They're like, hey, we need you to take over this. I said, okay. IT and technology became common about 30 years ago. And I say that, I mean, technology has been in existence for a long time, but really, if you think about it, it was 93, 94 time, I think, is when AOL, it became more consumer. It was available to consumers, let me put it that way. Not that technology is 30 years old, but it's just that. So with that in mind, if you can imagine, if there's a 30-year-old running around, not understanding everything that needs to be, and somebody that's been thrown in saying, hey, start with the help desk and start doing this, as it's needed, as we're discovering. So the industry is still very, very young. And to give you an idea with that in mind, AI is a year and a half old.
Yeah.
ChatGPT was released last March, as in 2023,
Wow, yeah.
March or April time. So we are really very young.
Yeah.
Before we started recording, you were telling me kind of a analogy or picture that you have for cyber. So I'd love for you to share that with everyone.
So the way I look at it is, I know you have kids, but when you have kids, we start with the idea of the terrible twos, because they get into everything.
Right.
And then you start plug in the power outlets, then you lock the cabinets and all these things, right? Because you're trying to show the protection. You're putting the gates that they don't roll down the stairs, right? You're doing all those things. Then as they're a little bit better, you got the seatbelt, then you start walking and hey, this is the sidewalk. You don't walk on the main street. Then this is how you cross the street. Look both ways. Those kind of things happen as somebody's growing. Then they grow into that and saying, okay, they start running. They start, doing more activities. And by this time, they have a guideline of some sort and guardrails, so to speak. But in this world of cyber, and technology, it happened and everybody said, oh, this is amazing. What can we do? And we started doing everything that we could imagine. So, and then the analogy that I was using is, we're all on this highway trying to get things done at a super fast speed that whatever you can afford to go as fast as you can. And then we were seeing accidents, which is the data breaches in a way, cyber attacks, somebody not following the rules, and somebody taking advantage of it, right? If you really even think about it as saying, oh, this guy didn't even have seatbelt. What happens if I hit him? Right. And they come out and, again, the analogy I'll use is if somebody dies in that accident, that means the business is dead at this point, right? Because they didn't have all the safety precautions at all. Then if you step back a little bit more, as I was mentioning, it's almost like we don't even have signals installed or crosswalks installed in the cyber world, is how I would like to put it.
Yeah, I think that's really relevant, actually. I mean, even outside of security and compliance, you mentioned AI. I mean, social media has been in the same vein. Like, we loved the fact that social brought people together and gave us that outlet to connect across continents. But now we're also looking at it as, but is it a really good thing for kids to be on it? We're backtracking on things now because we've gone so far, but now we're starting to realize implications of some of these cool tools that we brought to the market.
And I'll stay on the thing of the kids real quick, and then again, I have this habit of tangents, so I'll
go for it.
Okay. But what I want to focus is, one of the things that people always say, this new generation is all being raised by internet, right? With the technology, just to give you an idea, the people who were born in the 90s were kind of getting used to the AOL type of things, watching, getting on the internet. Then in the 2000s was more of the social media came in. If you think about it, the Facebook was right around 2007, 2008 era that brought people together, right? And then slowly the tablets, the iPhone came in, tablets came in, and we started doing more stuff. The transition that happened is in the 80s and 90s, prior to the 80s and 90s, kids grew up running around outside.
Right.
Then came TV, so the TV somewhat became the babysitter, but you kind of still had a view on saying, hey, they're watching something. What are you watching? Turn it off or change the channel, kind of things, right? You had a little bit of control. Then came this tablets and phones, and then now it's so close. Mom and dad are busy in their thing in the kitchen, setting up dinner table, whatever the kids are watching. You don't really know what they're watching at this point anymore.
Yeah.
Even though technology brought us together, we don't really have those. Again, we completely forgot how to train the kids. Hey, this is how you do the
Well, a lot of the kids are training the parents now,
Definitely,
I know my husband, he's like the go-to phone call for his parents on any sort of issue. Like I tell him he should write like a whole manual or just create all these like videos because there are things that he has to explain multiple times. And so I think it would be, I'm not a parent, but I think it would be difficult to be a parent in this era where you not only have to keep up with different technology for your own business or your own career path, but you're also having to keep up with the technology that your kids are using, who are probably going to figure out loopholes and things like that a lot quicker than you.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah. I mean, my kids are still really young, and we still have full like control over their activity. But even we had to learn, like, okay, how do I go into Netflix and make sure that these things don't show up?
Right.
I know it's a really simple thing, like permissioning and security, but like that's something, I have had to learn. Yeah. But it's also like shocking. We don't have to get into this tangent, but shocking how native that is. My younger son is almost 2, and he can take my phone, swipe it up, turn on the camera, walk around, cheese.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, you're not even 2 years old yet, and he knows how to intuitively do that.
I was amazed when my 3-year-old niece had a tablet and she was watching like, Bluey or something on YouTube, right? And knew that 3-second countdown before you could skip the ad.
Oh, yeah.
And so she's like, and then 3, 2, 1, boop. Yeah. And she skipped it. And I was like, how did you know how to do that?
Yeah. I think the analogy comes full circle for business owners and people who are running businesses now, that there are these guidelines and security that's trying to now come into place, but they've become so used to their way of doing things, just like kids, that they don't want to unlearn. It's not fun or exciting anymore.
Not anymore. Yeah. And
So-
you could apply that exact same thing to the businesses.
Right.
You're trying to unlearn. I mean, even Netflix probably didn't think, oh, I need to create a kids section in a portal. Even YouTube didn't have it for a long
Right.
For a long time, yeah.
and now they're like, oh, wait, our algorithms are pushing this.
Yeah.
They don't know the profiles. I mean, but anyway, there are a lot of side tangents here. But
Well, I mean,
I'm not-
to the
yeah.
business aspect of it, I think entrepreneurs have had to go through that as
Right.
well.
Oh,
Where
definitely, yes.
recently I had to take a PCI compliance course
Yes.
because I use QuickBooks. And even though QuickBooks is the secure platform and they handle really the security, I had to take a course and become certified in it so that I understood
What that
the
is.
implications of me neglecting to review things. Even though they're the tool and the platform, I still have some responsibility in it. And I remember getting that email. I'm like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And I know how important it is.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Definitely. I mean, it is really.
No one wants to, but then, and they also never think that it's going to be them, right?
Right.
That they're going to be the one that gets hacked or
It
breached or
terrifies me that
whatever.
it could be me one day. And I mean, I'm a marketer. Like, I use Google Docs for a lot of things. I don't have life or death scenarios. I don't have $1 million privacy plans on my server, but I'm still like terrified that one day it could be me.
Well, speaking of that, you talked about data breaches, and we see them like just on the news, even locally here in Wichita, like businesses.
WPD just got hacked.
So you deal with that every day. What are your biggest concerns for businesses, like as you look out at what's happening today?
So in many ways, I think what the basic understanding for a business, it needs to be, there's this mindset right now, is IT is a cost center. Because it's a thing that is not tangible. What I mean by that is when you think about it is you have an IT person comes to the executive saying, hey, we hired 5 people, so I need money for licensing. I need, they need this. But you're like, no, to save money, we did this, right? What's happening in that case is on the flip side of it, same example, if the company has an engineer who says, hey, I need a faster PC, they'll spend $3,000 to $5,000 on a amazing PC, a big monitor, because it's tangible. They have no problem. But if IT person comes and says, hey, I need $5,000 for this, they're like, why? Is it really needed? Why should we? I mean, are you sure?
Is that more compliance cost or?
No, I mean, it could be anything. I mean, if the person wanted to say, hey, I want to install something secure for emails, for that matter, right? And he says, oh, the cost is $5,000. It'll keep us safe. They're like, really? Do we need it? But when you have a $5,000 PC, they're like, oh yeah, this guy's using it. I can see it. He's printing these designs or whatever he's doing. It's tangible things coming out. Whereas email security that you're implementing, whatever software that you may be implementing, you don't see it. It happens in the background. And they're like, okay, I don't know. I guess we spent $5,000 for something. I'm not sure if it'll be helpful or is needed, but I'm going to take your word on it. So that mindset still goes like, it's costing us more to do the business. So with that in mind, the reclassification of what you do in the business, what you have in the business, and what you need, that needs to happen first. Another analogy I'll use is, dating myself 20 years ago, every office almost had a filing cabinet. HR had their own, accounting had their own, engineers had their own. HR person didn't walk in to engineering, said, let me see what you have. They didn't care to.
Right.
But in the internet, on the server, you have all these different files and folders. And first, they don't classify. HR doesn't need to see what's happening in finance. Finance doesn't need to see in engineering. So when that classification hasn't happened yet, then everybody has access. And the IT person is just kind of like, okay, what do you need? You need this. Okay, I'm done. And he's busy helping with, I can't print, I can't log in.
Right.
Right.
Things that are Googleable.
In some ways, yeah. So with that, with the data breaches and data security, first this classification of what you have needs to happen.
So it's almost like internal security first.
It's the first
kind of?
step. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Then you can say, okay, finance, these are the 4 people in finance. They only need access to these 4 things.
Permissioning.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right? Role-based permissions is what it's really called.
Yeah.
So when you start there, now it's almost think of a physical part. Here's the office. I lock the key, and these 4 people have the keys to go and check that. Where is the data stored? why do you need it? What that also does is if somebody breaks in, again, I'll use the physical aspect to translate that into cyber. If somebody breaks into the office, they're focused, I want financial information, they will look for the finance office that'll break into it. And you have the keys and you're locked in and all this. But if you don't, the minute everybody gets in the cyber world, they walk in, they have access to everything. They're like, I'll sort it out later. Let me grab everything that I can and steal it so they can't use it and encrypt that data. And let me figure out what I can do with it. And I'm going to hold them hostage.
Yeah.
So
and
in
send them a ransom note over it.
Exactly.
So if the internal security had been done first, they would only have been able to get into like one
room,
one area.
Yeah.
And that's like, I mean, still not great, but,
no, but still you
less
have limited
damage.
Correct. Limited.
Okay.
And you're not quite 100% mitigating the risk, but at least you're reducing it. And now you know, okay, I need to do this.
Are businesses resistant to that internal classification process?
I think the challenge is they don't know they need it.
Okay. The education.
Education. A lot of it, again, coming back to this baby is only 30 years old. We're still understanding. What can we do? What do we have? What do we need? And so everybody's so busy, like, oh, this is amazing. We can do this. Great. Let's implement it. And now we're going backwards.
Yeah.
Do you need it? Oh, why does he have it? Why doesn't he have it? And people are like, I want to see what happens. Can I do this with mine? And you gave access to everybody. Therefore, you lose the security in that part.
So I have a question because we've talked about data governance in some of our episodes and kind of that important piece of if everyone has access to data, they have more opportunity to innovate within their roles. But that almost sounds like it goes against security in this case. What are your thoughts around data governance as it relates to like role-based permissioning and things like that?
Right. And I think you could give the freedom to what you need. And so if you're in the marketing side, you can have all the access you need for all the marketing folders, marketing responses. And I think this is the other piece that doesn't happen as often is in companies, we don't have conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And obviously the COVID also didn't help because everybody's working remotely in some ways and all those things. So what that does is the transfer of information is not there. But, and I'll use your role here as a marketing, you're like, oh, I wonder what cool stuff engineering has done. Have they done something new? And you just go roam around on the server, click on the files. Oh, this is a nice part. Maybe I should put it up. Talk about what it is. Then you call somebody that you know in engineering, like, hey, I want to talk about we can do this. We can make this. Right? But you already explored. You went and grabbed the stuff you need. But what that does is it's almost like you have left all the doors, windows open for somebody to come in, see what you want. So from an attacker's perspective, they have all access.
So in theory, what could happen, and we don't have to get too technical here, but I think I hear what you're saying in terms of like, you just start opening doors to raw data and like very proprietary information. But what can be done is that data can be flown through to an analytics layer and that can be governed differently.
Definitely.
Because we start talking about like silos and what you're explaining is the definition of silos. You're siloing the data and that causes problems because I think what Jordan made me think is like, well, marketing doesn't need to know just marketing. Like we need to know other stuff. And so I think that's a common problem is like marketing doesn't know what sales is up to and sales vice versa, or engineering, like what are we working on? What are we innovating? Like there needs to be communication. But I think that data can be rolled up, combined, and visualized, and then the dashboards or analytics can be then governed to who needs to see them.
Well, I like that you brought up the conversation piece because that's something that we've talked a lot about as well. And that's actually one of the key reasons why I even started my business is that I wanted more of the opportunity to collaborate with cross-functional departments and not just marketers, because marketing is just the outlet to talk about what we do. You have to understand the business and the business needs in order to know how to do that effectively.
Definitely.
But that collaboration piece is so important. And so that's why I brought up data governance, because if you can at least like have that outlet to say, okay, here's how productivity is performing internally. Here's how it's influencing like our customer experience. How can I use that as like positive messaging out there, right?
Definitely.
But it takes like at least having that like baseline data set. But even as, like, if I were looking at something from that perspective, I would still want to get around the table with all of the key players just to ask them about their perspectives, because that's where you get like the actual meat of what's truly going on. Data gives you the starting point of a story.
Sure.
Yeah.
But from a marketer's perspective, it's not the story.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll add more to that. And here's the strange part. You're talking about silos, right? We don't need silos, is what you're saying when it comes to data, because you can paint a picture of what's happening, right? On the governance and security side, and then on our physical side, we flip that way because the marketing department is kind of going, I need to focus on this. Engineering is like, I'm here. I don't need to talk to marketing. And the sales guy is like, well, I need to get an input from this engineering guy. Can we do this? And they only go to each other when they need it. But they don't ever talk about, hey, these are the amazing things we're doing, which a company should say every quarter, hey, this is the amazing stuff I am doing.
Right.
This is the cool sales opportunity I had. Can we do this? Then you could say, okay, let me share what I have. Then you can build sharing of the data exactly the way you want it. And this is where your governance will come in. But that communication piece is not happening in a lot of places. And people working from home are even more isolating themselves in their own departments.
Right. And I don't think that necessarily opening up the data at the moment it's not a problem of the actual data being siloed. It is a product of lack of collaboration and communication. So it's more of a conceptual silo than it is a data silo. But I think sometimes it can flow down. People can be frustrated that they don't have access to see what other people are doing.
I think in some cases, like what we've experienced is that data governance gets tied to, or the ability for data to be utilized gets tied to security in a way where it gets communicated internally as you're not allowed to have that. But the conversation about like, well, I'm not going to hand over raw data.
Correct.
Of course, like accounting should only have this raw piece of data, right?
Correct.
But I should be able to visualize, like if we're taking the example of like what InfoFluency does, you know, I should be able to see, okay, well, how is revenue impacting productivity? How is all of that impacting customer experience, blah, blah, blah. But I think sometimes those terms internally with those that maybe aren't as familiar with data infrastructure, security, compliance, it automatically gets tied to, well, in order for you to have data means that we're not secure or we are so secure that you're not allowed to have it. But what we're talking about here is that that shouldn't actually be a barrier. There are ways to keep it secure, but also have that collaboration.
Because in all reality, like there are some things that you don't want certain people in the company to see.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
it's
HR can't share anything that they have with everyone.
Even the finances. It's like some companies, the executive team, like they don't want that trickle down to see the P&L, right?
Right.
So there are some that's good.
So I think that's where that governance piece needs to happen. Even if a mature business, you need to have that conversation about that. And I think it's because we are so connected so much online, I don't think there's any more, as they called it, the water cooler talks anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
Because that's how you had information from each other's departments. People would hang out in their break room, talk about this, that, the other.
Right.
Do you know what they're doing? You know, those kind of things. And people socialized a little bit more. And we don't have that. And that helps the governance of the data as well, right?
Yeah.
In many ways, because you're like, oh, here, you know, so-and-so is doing this. And they're like, oh, I didn't even know you could do this. Our company has a capability.
Right.
All of a sudden, the marketing and salespeople are like, wait, what? I can go sell this. We can do this.
Right.
We didn't know, right? So we don't have those conversations.
Yeah.
And everybody mentally are working in the silos and leaving the data in non-silos, I guess.
Yeah.
And the IT person is just trying to accommodate everybody, right? If you think about it.
People are just like, what is
I'm just trying to give you what you want.
That's right. I mean, and you know, and I again, it's a side tangent on this part, but what I'll tell you is, this is the phrase that I personally don't like, and a lot of IT people are not going to like what I'm about to say, which is we always talk about the human element and the human error that causes the breaches, okay? I think it's the IT people. The reason I'm going to flip this because and I'm going to use, again, another analogy, is all of a sudden, let's think of a castle, and then you have this one little guy was told to secure the whole castle, which is the IT guy, because people don't understand.
Right.
So now he has all these different gates that he has to guard. And he's like, I'm going to hold it. I have the keys to the castle. I'm not going to give it to anybody. But he also made himself indispensable, but at the same time, he's now working 20 hours a day because he has to do a perimeter check, walk around, right? And then when something happens, he is...
At 3 a.m.
Right,
Yeah.
and he's himself trying to defend it or recover it. But the idea, so my thing is for IT people saying, hey, we have engineers that are amazingly putting stuff in the space and creating amazing things. So they're smart. Don't call them, you don't understand technology. They'll understand. Trust me. They went to a 4-year college and a 6-year master's. Finance people, oh my God, they go through the tax codes every year trying to figure out, right? So they're smart people in the company, so don't tell them they don't understand this.
Yeah.
So really recruit all these lieutenants for yourself and explain and come back, talk about the governance.
Yeah.
So in some ways, IT people have kind of became those guardians.
Yeah.
And everybody started dumping it. Oh, it powers on and off, so it must be your thing. Figure it out, right? I mean, really, if you think about it, that's the mindset that we're in.
Yeah. We just had a short episode where we were talking about the evolving role of a CTO and how it's just a unicorn role now because of how much is involved in technology and how it has a component of analytics and data in it now.
Oh, definitely.
But one of the points that we were talking about is that if you have like the full gamut of it, are also kind of in charge of implementing that data-driven culture and talking about exactly what you're just describing is it's not just that individual or that team's role anymore. Like they should set the vision, they should set the stage, they should provide great direction, but it can't just be like everybody has a responsibility in understanding this now to a certain extent.
Right.
And so I'm glad that you mentioned that because we were just talking about that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. I mean, it's really one of those things that everybody's mindset has to change a little bit. I think it's not just the IT people, it's not just the CEO. I think everybody has to kind of reframe ourselves.
And I mean, I think we've talked about innovation. Like this is almost like a small way. Like we need to innovate the way people learn about IT.
Yeah.
And learn about data security and things that are but are really important for the longevity and security of the business. And I think that's what everyone wants, right? It's like your engineer, your designs and innovations can't go to market or can't flourish if we get hacked or whatever. And so it's like everyone has to see and understand the implications. But like what's traditionally been done, I feel like for anything is let's roll out a video course to the company and have them watch it and learn stuff. It's like,
and then take this 10-question quiz, get the certificate to put on your cubicle.
And I'm like, that is not the way to teach people that are not inclined already about IT and data and security. But we need to like innovate. And I'm not saying I have the answer, but just like innovate in the way that we approach that.
So one of the things that I try to talk to the IT folks is, whatever your budget is, it doesn't matter. But I want you to, based on how big the small company is, at the bare minimum, add $100 a month. So you can gather everybody up, throw a lunch party, whatever it is, right? And just talk about what's happening everywhere. What are we seeing? Just educate, saying, hey, I'm here trying to protect this whole castle, which is $1 billion business or $1 million business. I mean, even if a small business here locally, it could be $1 million business and you're paying this guy $50,000 to protect $1 million business. And he doesn't have the support, he doesn't have it. So the idea is for the IT people to come out and say, hey, let me share with you what's happening. I need your help, right? So that's where I think a two-way street conversation needs to happen.
Yeah. I heard someone say one time in a different context, was like, you should just do the opposite of what people expect. And it's like IT people are expected to be boring and just doing things like this way. And, no offense. Because I mean, we're all in that, nerdy space. But like, how can we do the opposite of what people, like a business out there that's listening to this, how can you do the opposite of what people expect?
I've actually become buddies with IT people in almost every like corporate job I've had. Because I have had more fun being in the basement with the IT people, understanding like, okay, what is our infrastructure? If I want to bring these tools into the company, like I have to work with IT in order to get those vetted and approved. But also I have learned so much from IT people on how to roll it out appropriately to the organization, where a lot of times, like, I want to just be like, we've got this tool, let's do a training, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And then I've had colleagues that work in our IT that say, hey, here's my experience in rolling it out that way. You're going to have a lot greater success if you actually start with like a beta group. And then you do, and I have learned so much more about how to like work inner office politics from IT teams than anyone else, because y'all have had to navigate that for the last 30 years.
And at the same time, no, IT people happen to walk into everybody's office. Or touch people's PCs, so they kind of hear stuff. Right?
You are kind of like the little silent spies.
And they're kind of in their own world. They know what's happening in the company, but they can't speak. And people keep them in the basements. They don't come out. Right? I mean,
give IT people windows. They want to see natural light.
That's right. But I mean, it's really a collaborative effort in many ways. And I think the more technology has been in place, the less collaboration is what's happening. And people are coming back into the silos.
So don't remove the human element is what we're hoping to inspire.
Personally, I think so. I mean, you know, we're talking about, probably we'll transition more into that. It's the governance side of things, right? We now have all these compliances coming out, be it, you know, healthcare came out with this, the FCC for the communications, GDPR, the California, right? The challenge is everybody thinks, oh my God, here's another regulations. They're telling me to walk in a straight line. I don't want to. I'm having too much fun. Right? So the businesses are going, here goes the government wants to get into my business and tell me how to do it.
When it's actually driven by consumers.
Right? So we need to, how to protect the data, how to protect ourselves. I'm going to go on a leap and say 99% of the people don't even read the terms and conditions.
No.
Right?
No.
Definitely not.
And we are giving away everything ourselves. So there's no governance. The product who are making the product, they don't have guidelines, or they're not following the guidelines because they want to get out and put the product out there. So now we're kind of backtracking, saying, wait, here's a crosswalk, wait for the walk sign, right? Put a pause.
That's what you're saying, like, that's what the regulations now coming out are trying to do, is like, okay.
Make a street grid work.
Because everybody's going everywhere. The data that our personal data, and we have become complacent in many ways. Because we've had so many breaches. You're like, everybody has my social security number now.
I mean, that data breach just happened, and it was like no one even blinked an eye. It was like, anymore. Well, there goes my social security. Like, what am I supposed to do about that? You know, get a new one?
And so on that note, my advice really is take control of your stuff. Take control of the data. Don't share it. I mean, I actually, this will sound funny. I have AT&T. AT&T hack happened almost a year now. My debit card was compromised, and I went, changed it, paid the bill, compromised again. In 1 month, I had to get 3 debit cards. After that, I said, I'm done. So now I just do everything on cash. If I need to, I go to the bank and say, hey, I need a money order.
Do you stay with AT&T?
I need to change it because I'm stuck in there for a little bit. Because I'm paying on the phones. But
you're like, I'm not putting my card information back in there.
Not anymore. So now I kind of go and then I pay bills, making debit checks or because it happened like, you know, and then really that frustrated me because AT&T had no solution.
Almost like it's become so common that when that stuff happens now, it's now just they release an apology and say, hey, just need you to be aware this has happened. Have fun. We're going to go back over here, and we're doing these things to make sure it doesn't happen again, but there's no like landing page for you to go and see like what's your progress on that. Like there's no like
nobody wants to talk about
customer service person or like team that you can directly call to talk about it. It's just they did the press release media announcement. You're like, well, happened again. And then you went on with your life. We've become very complacent, not just with where we're letting our data go, but also like we're not holding anybody accountable to it.
Government is coming out with regulations, but there's nobody coming out and saying, let me see if you've done it. Right?
Which that's a big thing with CMMC, right?
So one of the things that has happened in 2016, really what any company that does work with defense, a military base.
I have actually. Keep going.
So in 2016, it was implemented. 2 or 3 years into it, we realized China built our own F-16 from all our designs and everything. They built a Hummer. They built some other weapons because we didn't protect the data. Mom and pop shops are just like, I don't have anything. What are you going to take from me?
Yeah.
Right? That mindset is there. So now, finally, in 2020, DoD said, okay, we need to put some restrictions on. Let's come up with the accountability part. So they established a third-party organization who's going to come out and do audits. Then they came back with, okay, for doing the audits, we need to figure out how to do it, who's going to do it. So they set up all the training programs and all that. So now, just 2 weeks ago, it cleared all those things. It'll be presented to the Congress to make it a law. So moving forward, March of next year, anybody that supplies anything to the DoD, you are either level 1 or level 2, and the contracts will start showing that starting March for level 1. That, for example, this is crazy, but it needs to happen, which is if you are selling, let's say our Air Force Base here, and you supply chicken to them. It's a common thing you can buy anywhere, but they need to safeguard that information because our adversaries can use it saying, hey, I've been watching, they order 50 pounds of chicken every week. This time it's 200. What's going on? Is there deployment? Is there somebody visiting? Is there an opportunity to attack the base? Right? So we need to safeguard even that basic information. So level 2 we'll start seeing that part, like when somebody's making a design or a part or something. Now they have a blueprint of certain things. So they need to safeguard it so they're now one level up.
Yeah.
And that will start implementing next year, probably October time is what they're expecting. So if you don't have certificates, you're not getting the award.
No more money for you.
Yeah.
It's almost like pay to play kind of thing, but you're also safeguarding it. You're showing I'm following your rules. For following the rules, I get the contract. Because even if you look at HIPAA, it's been in place, but it's self-governing. And they report it only if something happens. In Wichita, there's been multiple healthcare facilities that happen this too.
It's like HIPAA only gets the main compliance with HIPAA is just don't share with, I'm a doctor, I saw you as a patient, I'm not going to go and tell someone else about you as a patient. Like that's like the main thing that you hear people actually complying with. But again, there's no
third-party
accountability of like,
Did you do
oopsie-daisy, all of our patient data just got released.
I mean, again, you have to have somebody who can come out and say, hey, I'm going to check. Did you implement everything to keep it secure? Are you leaving the data without the classification who should have access, right? Role-based access. Are you doing that? Somebody needs to come out and do that. You have FCC for the communications. There's the same way. You have PCI compliance. A lot of people don't even know what it is. They kind of go through yes, or whatever it is, the answers, and think they're compliant. They don't know what they should be doing in the back end.
Yeah. And one of the main things too is there's just a shortage of people that know how to
do it,
audit, and make sure that people are compliant.
Right.
And there's also a lack of tools and ironically, technology capability to quickly audit a business and tell them where they can't, where they're falling short.
Sure.
And I think that's, we're talking very simplistic, but there's some businesses where they have on-premise servers, they have tons of computers and IP, what is it? Is that
IP connections? Addresses.
Addresses. There's just so much complexity. It's not just like...
To add a little bit more to it, as you say that, reason healthcare gets attacked easily. They have so many devices that are connected. You think about your patient's bed, nurse monitoring system, they're monitoring.
They got that little walkie thing.
They have
scanning the bracelets
to get the medication. Right? So they're doing all these things, and what that means is they have that many doors and windows for attackers to get in because it has an IP address. Therefore, if they get in one door, then they're good, right? So healthcare, with that in mind, like you said, there's so much devices attached now. We're connected so much. It's hard to say what would happen. One of the cases, I'm trying to remember, forget the city, a hospital had a ransomware. They had to turn away the patient, the ambulance, and the patient died on the way to the other hospital. So then who do you blame? And the people want to sue the hospital because saying you should have followed the guidelines. You should have had it up because you could not provide the care because you didn't have access to the system.
And you have a building full of healthcare individuals who are like, I simply just really want to help people.
That's it.
But they exist in this system that is now super complicated, a business within its own right as well. And so that is literally painting the picture of a life and death scenario and how data and cybersecurity is so important in this. Think about that in a case of what if our Wichita Police Department got hacked. Unfortunately, like anybody who's been in our jail system or got a ticket or whatever, like I've got 3 tickets from previous, like I'm out there now too, you know? So we've had that, but let's say like, okay, I need to call 911. Their system has been hacked. I don't get EMS or I don't get fire or I don't get police. I get some automated ransomware saying sorry and my house is burning down behind me. You know, like that. I mean, that could be a very real situation.
With that in mind, I think I'll ask you, how many phone numbers do you know? Have you memorized?
Oh gosh, I only have like my
5.
husband.
My home phone that doesn't exist anymore growing up.
Sure.
I still have my home phone. 2 of my home phone numbers.
My mother-in-law
Okay.
and my dad.
I only know my husband's.
Right. Well, let's not go to jail yet. But let me just put the same scenario, right? You had a car accident, your phone got crushed. You can't call anybody. Somebody comes up like, hey, here's my phone, use it, call whoever you want. You're like, I don't know
What
who
am I
call.
supposed to do? Yeah.
Who do I call now? You don't know the numbers anymore. You can't even call a tow truck to come out, right? I mean, we are so connected and we don't even have that, you know, as you're talking about data and the security and availability and how crazy it can get for ourselves.
Yeah.
That is so true. Yeah.
So, and I actually on purpose don't have people's names. I don't have a name next to yours, but I know the number. I was like, until I get it after a few times, like, oh yeah, I know this number, I know this person. I can call them later when I need to. Then I add the name.
Interesting. Okay.
I'm like, even if you get stuck on the side of the highway, you ran out of gas, who are you going to call? You don't have a number, your phone's not charged. And somebody comes by, what do you need? Here's a phone, call them. I don't know the number, right? I mean, that's the scenario.
Okay, so we're getting into the last kind of piece, which is a perfect segue. Data breaches. Halloween-esque. So can you talk to us about some of the most like scary situations that you've been in, or worst case scenario for a company being hacked or breached or ransomed? What is it called when they're like held hostage?
Ransom.
I guess that.
Ransomed.
I mean, there's multiple cases. One of the manufacturing companies got a ransomware. They were down for almost 10 days. They paid a ransom of like $250,000 or something like that. They got the data back, but now trying to figure out if the data is correct or not took over 6 or 8 months because it's unstable, because they had locked it and unlocked it. So a lot of the data in unencrypting it messed up. You don't have it. During this time, your production downtime. Now you have to pay overtime. And then for those 2 weeks or so until they got the data back, nobody's working. Factory is just quiet. So now I think about it's no longer just
That's
that
a compound issue.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, 3 years ago or 4 years ago, Dallas County was hacked. And I know our Wichita as well has had that happen. We will hear more about it in 2 years. Dallas County, when that happened in 2020, I think about 2021, even now, they're trying to figure out because some of the property tax information is no longer there. When somebody's trying to sell the house, they're like, oh, wait, where's your property? Because they thought they're functioning and all this is great. But when they try to pull it, that data was corrupted. We don't have it. So they're still, in many ways, cleaning up the aftermath of it.
And when you think about that now being several years later.
Yeah.
4 years ago.
4 years ago,
Or
yeah.
5
Yeah.
almost,
So if you search, Dallas County hack, you'll read about that exact same thing. Now, one of the other things, the scary part is painting a picture or worst case scenario, right? Let me, our state of Kansas, we are big agriculture and beef exports and things of that type. We have automated a lot of that. In the agriculture world, the watering of the fields and all these things, and you kind of check how the moisture of the land, and those kind of things are kind of being implemented. In the cattle world as well, they're kind of keeping track of who's eating how much, is it time to slaughter them and all that stuff. And then the automated system that slaughters them, cuts and all these things, it's not really as many people that are there, right? And these things are vulnerable. And if you can imagine, in Florida, 2 years ago, somebody hacked into a wastewater treatment plant, messed with the pH levels, made the water poisonous. It just so happened that the person who happened to be like, oh, this is strange, what is this? And the water did not get released to the public.
But had that one person.
Yep, he was not even a tech. He happened to see some irregularity and stopped it. Now, if you can imagine that happening to the state of Kansas, all your crop is messed up. You have
The animals.
cattle. We no longer have anything we can export. Cattle
Right.
has died, is poisoned, right? I mean, it has to go through a couple cycles to rebuild it. I mean, that's really the picture of our grid of power system. That is vulnerable. If you look back and kind of do a search, it's called Sandworm, is a book. It talks about how Russia attacked Ukraine and crippled their infrastructure before the war in 2014, 2016 time. And they had turned off the electricity for them multiple times. And you can imagine if it happens to us, how vulnerable we are.
Well, every apocalyptic movie out there, when this episode airs, it will be spooky season officially. And so everybody's going to be watching all of the Halloween movies. If you watch any of the zombie apocalypse ones, it always starts with the grid going down. Like outside of people going nuts, it starts with the grid going down because then that makes people go more nuts. If you can't, because we're so connected, you can't call your family to see if they're okay. You can't turn your lights on.
Yeah.
Wichita is having a hard enough time right now conserving water.
Right,
So
yeah.
like, I gotta water my lawn, No, you don't. But anyway, like we are so used to these benefits of the grid that when we don't have them, we don't know what to do. And that when you're painting that kind of a picture and noting the vulnerabilities, I mean, even government is so like our government has the worst systems in some cases, and it's like
it's archaic. A lot of the systems to upgrade.
But that is real. War does not have to happen necessarily with physical people and weapons anymore. It can happen with messing with people's minds in these ways, and then we go crazy and we just go after each other.
And I think if you let's just not even worry about somebody attacking us. If you think of a storm that takes out power, if there's a storm and you don't have power, you don't know how to function.
Do you guys watch 24 Throwback?
24,
with Jack Bauer or with Kiefer
I've seen it.
Sutherland? There's one season, so it's always like 24 hours of a day.
Okay.
That he has to solve the problem.
So there's one season where someone hacked into like a power plant and it was going to go nuclear. Something like I don't know if that's even possible. But it was like going to melt down basically and like release a ton of toxins into the air. And like that was like probably hacked through some sort of system.
Well, these things don't get super duper made up without some sort of basis of it,
I mean, that's what I would think.
Foundation of like, could this be possible?
But that's scary. Like that, something nuclear like exposure happening at a grand level to a city or a metropolitan area.
I mean, if you think about it, Kansas has that big nuclear power plant.
Manhattan,
think about it. If somebody hacks into it, and you'll be affected, and we don't know how to function. I think that's the bigger concern that I have is how do we function? Because people don't think about how everything works. We are so much into, I need it now.
I trust it. I got it.
I book my flights. I order my food, but everything's happening automatically.
I'm working with a chat. I'm working with a chat bot instead of an actual human.
And automatically you're like, oh, the food is delivered, groceries are delivered, everything's happening. Then when you expect, if something like this happens, how do you function?
Yeah.
We're back in the physical world where we're running into each other and accidents happening because we don't know, right?
Yeah.
Because we have not been outside the house driving or knowing those rules, right? In a way. And like I said, any of those shows in the movies always show that. We go crazy, we attack, we have accidents because everybody's in a... One of the other pieces that if you want to think more on the personal level, there was a show called Person of Interest. If you haven't watched it, it talks about how vulnerable we are as people.
Yeah.
How much our data is available. People can hack into the security cameras, look at what's happening. One of the pieces that I think a lot of things that businesses, and I guess we'll bring it back to a business real quick, they want somebody else to take this and deal with it. And you always hear, we don't really want to buy a server, let's just do the cloud.
Right.
But they don't ask the right questions. And I come back to the basic human element of saying, hey, before you put your baby into a babysitter daycare, you want to check them out, check their website. Do they have any complaints? Do they have license? You go visit the place. You go ask them, hey, how fast is your response time? My baby's sick, something happened. You go through this interview process of putting a baby in a daycare.
Yeah.
And your data is your baby,
Yeah.
right? Wherever you're putting it.
I'm convicted. I did that due diligence for my kids, but yet for my own data, I'm like,
I think if businesses don't ask that question,
Yeah.
putting your baby, because your data is your baby and really the lifeline of your business.
yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
not talking about how to raise this baby, go from 1 million to 2 million without classifying the data, without giving the right access, right training to people who's going to take care of it, right?
Is that your final word, or do you have any last minute piece of advice for business owners?
I want them to kind of rethink the business structure. Don't think of it, the cyberspace, as somebody else's issue. It's your stuff. Make sure where it's going, who's using it, who has access to it, and how could it be weaponized, so to speak. When a ransomware hack happens, you have to worry about your own employees' data that has been misused, or your vendors' information, your banking information, people stealing your intellectual property.
Yeah.
So businesses needs to really kind of reclassify and think about their own data,
Yeah.
what it is, and don't stick with this idea, I don't have anything.
Yeah.
You have something.
I think if businesses, and I mean ourselves included, if you can kind of put it in the perspective of if worst case scenario were to happen,
Right.
do you really want to be the person to stand up in front of everybody to say it happened? Do you want to have to go to employees to
Yeah.
tell them that their data has been hacked? Do
Yeah.
you want to have to go and call your most important clients and grovel
Yeah.
because of something that you could have been a lot more prepared over?
Yeah.
And I think from a marketing perspective, whenever you're like in a company, you always want to try to have a crisis communications plan. Like, what if something were to happen to the CEO? You have to have backups there. That way you're not scrambling at last minute to put something out.
On that similar note, you said crisis plan, right? As many companies I've dealt with, they don't have what we call in this world is this incident response plan. They don't have it. What's funny is the school started and everybody did a fire drill in the school for the kids.
Yeah.
But we don't do it with cyber stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have a plan? Who
Run
do you
fire
call?
drills for.
We call it, it's called tabletops is what it's referred to in the cyber. Yeah.
Okay.
If it happens, do you know who to call?
Yeah.
Who's going to do what? Do you have the numbers? Oh, it's on my phone. It's not.
That'd be a
connected,
fun
right?
workshop
Yeah.
at some
Tabletops,
point.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those things after you create an incident response plan, then you do a tabletop exercise to see if you know what you're supposed to do. Did you print out your insurance guy's number and vendor's information? Because
Yeah.
your data is no longer accessible.
Yeah. You don't
Back
have
to
their
the-
number. You can't
find it.
get their number out of your
Right.
phone.
So that's really the idea of what you called it as a crisis incident plan. It's really the incident
Yeah.
plan that every business needs to have one and exercise it quarterly, or if not annually, at least, so everybody in the company knows what they're supposed to do.
I feel like we got some
Yeah.
spooky episodes.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Tarek, for joining us
Yes,
and
thank you.
shedding a light and making it. I liked all your analogies, like helping kind of bring this to the common person, business owner who doesn't know much about cyber IT and can just kind of think it's someone else's problem, right? Thank you for enlightening us. I learned a lot.
About some scary scenarios, I actually feel like it's palatable. It is something that any role within a company could engage in, and we need to keep worst case scenarios in mind. That should motivate us. But I appreciate the human element that you've also brought into this, because that complacency level with like tools and technology, I do think is very important in this conversation, because if we treat it as complacency, then we're going to make ourselves more vulnerable.
Absolutely.
So if anyone wanted to reach out to you or get a hold of you, how could they do that?
I'm active on LinkedIn. I don't have any other social media.
Okay.
That's
Love
the
it.
best way.
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn is the best place. I mean, you can find it, Tariq Azmi, and then you'll find me.
Okay.
In which area.
Okay, perfect.
Perfect.
Reach out on LinkedIn if you have any more questions, because probably Jordan and I can't field your cybersecurity IT questions. We will just say, go ask them.
Yeah, and we might bring back a part 2 if you have a lot of these questions.
Sure.
Yeah.
And reach out to us directly if there is anything that you'd like to hear covered or any additional topics at hello@insightlypodcast.com, or just want to drop us a hi. Hello, how are you doing? We'd love to hear from you. Stay spooky. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.